Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right into it. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow in a world where the sun simply doesn't rise. And I'm not talking about a cloudy weekend, but for weeks on end. It's the terrifying reality of the polar night, which is this very real phenomenon up in the far north, where the sun literally stays completely below the horizon. Now, I want you to imagine facing that relentless, freezing darkness without any of our modern safety nets. No light switches to flick, no heated homes, no glowing screens. Just you, your community, and the dark. Which brings us to a massive, really fascinating puzzle. How on earth did ancient humans survive without sunlight? I mean, this question really challenges us to think differently. We aren't just talking about a few people scraping by for a couple of days. We're talking about how entire communities managed to not only survive, but actively thrive for thousands of years in these seemingly impossible, pitch-black conditions. Seriously, how do you live when your ultimate source of energy and light just disappears?
Well, looking at this really illustrates how vastly different our modern approach is compared to our ancestors. Think about it, if we were dropped into the polar night today, we'd lean heavily on technology, right? We'd use electric lights to fake the daytime, we'd pop vitamin D supplements, use light therapy boxes, and we'd rely entirely on imported food flown in from elsewhere. But the ancient solutions, they weren't about escaping nature. They relied on an interconnected, totally ingenious survival toolkit made up of food, fire, behavior, culture, and biology. So let's break down exactly how this raw survival system actually worked in practice.
Let's start with the first major physiological hurdle, which is vitamin D. You probably know it's a crucial nutrient normally produced in our skin when exposed to UVB radiation from the sun. It's absolutely essential for our bodies, for absorbing calcium, keeping muscles functioning, and powering our immune system. But here's the catch. During a dark Arctic winter, there is virtually zero useful UVB reaching the ground. So the body's normal solar pathway for making vitamin D just completely shuts down. And without it, humans get incredibly sick.
So what's the workaround when the sun just isn't there? Well, thousands of years of careful observation led ancient humans to a highly localized answer. They relied on an incredibly dense, fat and protein-rich marine diet that literally physically replaced the missing sunlight. They turned to fatty fish and marine mammals, salmon, herring, Arctic char, seals, and walruses. And they specifically consumed a lot of organ meats like the liver, which are basically nature's multivitamins, totally packed with fat-soluble nutrients. Now, they obviously didn't have nutrition labels or modern science, but they learned exactly what kept them remarkably strong in the dark.
Section 1. The body clock in the dark. Navigating time without the sun.
Now, getting enough vitamin D was really only half the battle. The constant darkness concealed a second, hidden challenge, the total disruption of the brain's internal timekeeper, the circadian system. This is our internal biological clock. It's responsible for regulating our sleep patterns, our hormones, metabolism, and immune activity. But the really key detail here is that it relies almost entirely on bright daylight to signal to our brains that it's daytime. When you take away that daylight, the biological clock gets completely, totally confused. Without the sun to guide it, sleep gets disrupted, hormonal rhythms shift, and mood can severely plummet.
So how do you fix a broken biological clock when you don't have artificial light therapy? Well, they used the oldest tool in the book, fire. Fire created a reliable daily rhythm. In absolute darkness, people would gather around the fire for essential warmth and light. In that light, they'd prepare food, repair their tools, and share stories. And then, as the fire naturally dims over time, human activity slows down right along with it. Fire basically became the new center of life. It wasn't just for cooking. It acted as a crucial artificial schedule to anchor their daily biological rhythms in all that absolute cold and darkness.
The really crucial point here is that they were practicing what modern scientists call circadian entrainment. That just means reinforcing biological rhythms through regular schedules. Now, ancient communities obviously didn't know this fancy scientific term, but their cultural traditions, knowing exactly when to gather, when to work, when to let the fire die down, flawlessly executed this concept to keep their biology and their minds perfectly on track.
Section 2. Rethinking the winter darkness. From disaster to season.
This brings us to a truly fascinating shift in how they actually thought about their environment, moving from just physiological survival to psychological thriving. You see, today we often view darkness as a negative, right? Like an endless disaster that we need to escape or cure. But the ancient Arctic view completely reframed this. To them, the darkness wasn't an emergency at all. It was just a distinct season. It was a time specifically set aside for storytelling, for teaching the children, and for holding vital cultural ceremonies. There is a profound psychological stability that comes from changing your mindset. When you expect the dark and you embrace it as a culturally rich time of year, it completely loses its power to terrify you.
When we synthesize this brilliant survival system, we see a direct counter to every single extreme challenge. Cold and darkness met with fire, which provided essential heat, light, and a daily schedule. That massive nutritional deficit solved by a dense, vitamin-rich marine diet. And the psychological dread was entirely managed through rich cultural traditions, stories, and art. What's amazing is that this same powerful combination of fire and food is exactly what allowed other prehistoric humans to survive and even create highly sophisticated, beautiful art deep inside pitch-black caves, miles away from any natural light.
The common denominator in all of this is the transformative power of fire. It reduced the brutal cold, it made tough food way easier to process, it provided the only light for miles around, and maybe most importantly, it created a central social gathering point. Honestly, when you really think about it, fire is perhaps the single most important technology in human history. Without it, a dark, freezing northern winter would be an absolute death sentence. But with it, those extreme environments became manageable and ultimately survivable.
Section 3. The Evolutionary Shift, where nature meets culture.
But you know, this story goes even deeper than just daily survival. Because over millennia, these ancient cultural practices and dietary habits eventually led to long-term biological changes. Over thousands of years, surviving in this specific way literally reshaped their genetics through natural selection. High-latitude populations developed totally unique biological adaptations, differences in skin pigmentation to maximize any available sunlight, specialized metabolic processes, and specific genetic variants that made them incredibly efficient at processing the fatty acids from their marine diets. It is a stunning, just awe-inspiring example of the powerful interaction between human culture and biology.
It is a beautiful, fascinating chain reaction. Think of it like this. An extreme environment creates a massive challenge. Then, immediate adaptations and food provide a solution. From there, culture and tradition preserve that knowledge so it doesn't get lost. And finally, over deep time, that sustained behavior actually influences the biology of future generations. They pass down these complex survival techniques for centuries without ever knowing the modern chemistry, genetics, or neuroscience behind why it worked. They just observed, they learned, and they lived it.
And this brings it all together with a core thesis of our explainer today. Quote, "They didn't survive extreme environments by defeating nature. They survived by learning how to live with it." I really want you to picture a freezing November night in the ancient Arctic. The sun has completely disappeared beneath the horizon. But inside a small community, a fire is roaring, a story is being told, tools are being carved. They are safe, they're connected, and they are completely prepared for the long darkness ahead because they didn't fight their environment, they adapted to it.
Humanity learned to thrive in the dark. The sun disappeared, but humanity certainly didn't. They adapted, they endured, and they built a rich life in the shadows. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. If our ancestors were capable of mastering the darkest, most unforgiving environments on Earth simply by shifting their perspective and learning to live in harmony with nature, what seemingly impossible challenges in our modern lives could we overcome by doing the exact same thing?